Can you hear me okay? Is that coming through all right? Can you hear me? Cool. At BYU, we pride ourselves in agreeing collectively that we follow and believe the existence of a truth. And what I'm here to tell you today as it relates to entrepreneurship is that there is no truth. So that's really the format for what I'll share amid stories, hopefully some questions. I know we'll have a Q&A after, but I've brought 4 of my favorite books. I like to do this when I speak here. By doers. I have a problem with reading books by people who didn't actually, start a business. But these are all great authors and doers. So here's the thing: is if you ask so there will be 4 questions, hopefully more in this setting. And if you ask something that shows that is a vulnerable question, like is somewhat uncomfortable for you, or that makes me uncomfortable, you get a book. I hope that in the time we have together that what will come across above all else is that we're not that much different from each other. I've got a few years on you and a little bit more experience than some, but I'm seeing some faces and you probably have more experience than I do. Hopefully this can be a safe environment where you feel like you can just learn, kind of take it in, but also engage and kind of poke and prick at me to draw something out that could be useful to you. Is that fair? So first, just a little get to know you. How many of you are undergrads by raise of hand? And how many are grads? So mostly undergrads. Any graduates? Okay, so it's all undergrad audience. How many of you think that you may or have an interest in starting a startup? And how many currently are starting a startup? Okay, great. Cool. So let's jump in. As mentioned, I find, and just before this, I'm talking to Logan Rogers. I don't know if do any of you know Logan by chance? Okay. Logan is great. He's one of my favorite people. Like, he always has energy, he always has a smile, and he always has a lot of questions. And what he's come to, which I appreciate, is he'll always preface now his questions. I was talking to him as I'm driving from Salt Lake to here. He goes, I know there's no perfect answer, and so I'm not looking to you as like the oracle for something, but I just really want your take on this, this, and this. And so we start talking. But that notion of understanding that there are more than one way to get something done, and especially in a startup, is critical. Oftentimes we want to look to a book or an accelerator program or BYU Launchpad as a fix-it or just this clear path, and none of them are. All of them are great, books, accelerators, and any type of kind of get that idea beyond idea to something more, but none of them are the answer. If there was a simple answer to starting a startup, it would be there and everybody would follow it and we would all be building billion-dollar companies. That's just not the case. So what I've tried to do is to pick out 3 kind of gritty for me, visceral, I think back to these times and I feel slightly uncomfortable, a little nauseous, a little fearful, or remember the fear that was in me in my last startup. And I want to draw from some of these and kind of juxtapose what I think we all may see as conventional wisdom with my experience, which again was just one iteration of how things actually go. There's a lot of wonky ways your startup or your idea can go. These were mine, and hopefully you have some good questions along the way. So I'm not really going to pause for questions. I just will be looking at you and hoping I see some hands shooting up for somebody who wants a book and wants to make me uncomfortable or be uncomfortable themselves. So this is our founding team. This is me, Brad, and Mick. Good friends. Mick is right now doing Techstars in London for his startup. Brad is working for a startup that both of us mentored, invested in, and then he joined locally called Studio. And this is us in 2007. Brad and I are on the heels of our 3rd startup. So we had a little success. Not in the 3rd startup, not really in the 2nd, but in the 1st that we did together. We made a little bit of money, which we socked away, and we learned a lot over the 3. And this new startup, which was Zinch, we were pumped about it. It sort of was meeting a need that we felt personally. We had experience ourselves, not only in applying and getting into college, but with folks who had an unclear path and maybe didn't have parents who went to college, and so we felt the pain. And Mick was fabulous. He was a student at the time at Princeton, dropped out to do this with us, and we're kind of off to the races. So we start by putting not just our sweat and energy into it, but 160K of our own money. So it was not a small amount we were still just finishing up school. But again, we had dropped out of school for a time, had a little bit of capital. So we have some capital. We have what we think is a killer idea. You can tell by the picture we kind of feel and look smug. We sort of are just feeling good about ourselves. And then we started to, we want to take our business to the next level, which to us seemed to be raise some money. And that's what I do now. But so we went to local angel groups. We had them all excited for what we were doing. And it seemed conventional wisdom at the time would say, gosh, you have like the perfect footing to raise capital and take this thing to the moon. And so we did. And the experience quickly turned into something not like exciting. And this is not our investor, but this kind of represents our investor group at the time, and what became what we thought was a match made in heaven. Successful, in this case, men who seemed to share our ideals, who were putting $750,000 of their dollars next to ours to build this thing. You had a question in the back.
Yeah, I'm curious. I want to go back just a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Since we're all undergrads, I'm just curious, what personal traits and qualities and characteristics did you identify in yourself as an undergrad that you kind of saw and then were motivated to work at, and then that enabled you to become a great entrepreneur? I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah.
You kind of started young, but what did you see in yourself that you said, I can be an entrepreneur?
Yep. So let's go back to this. So here's what happened. I was in econ. What's the hard one that's a prerequisite to the core? 110. So I'm in 110, and I took it intentionally in the spring or summer, I can't remember which one, so that I could do it fast, so hopefully I could retain enough to just power through the thing. I'm sitting in this class, and Brad, the night before, we're living together in his parents' basement. He's sharing with me this idea and this opportunity. I think I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going the business route, but I'm doing all my pre-med stuff too. When I was a kid, I grew up in a time where it was like you become a lawyer or a doctor if you want to do well. Their entrepreneurship was not as glorified as it is now. To answer your question, I'm in this class, and I think that's a good question. So I'll come and grab a book while I'm talking. This one's Tim Ferriss. The title's deceiving, and I don't believe in it, the 4-Hour Workweek, but he is phenomenal, and the principles in here I really, really love. I was reading this while I was on a subway car in Beijing, commuting an hour and a half every day. So anyway, thanks for the question. So I'm in this class, and I'm like antsy. I've never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I'm not the guy who would say I started a lemonade stand and grew that to 5 lemonade stands when I was 10, and I was not that guy. I worked really hard. I did my jobs, because my mom held me to it. I worked hard. I did well, and I just tried to kind of be on top of school and sports as growing up. I didn't have time really to try to be an entrepreneur. But I'm sitting in this class, and I cannot listen to the professor. Not that the content sucked. I think there's something to economics, and I actually think he was a good professor, but I'm just totally distracted. And so I put my textbook aside or whatever we had at the time, and I pull out a fresh piece of paper, and I write this 3-page letter to Brad saying why I think we should partner together, drop out of school, move to Detroit, Michigan to take up this opportunity. So for me, I can't tell you what it was in me. It was an antsiness that compelled me to action. And so I just thought, why not go for it? That was the first time. And then that turned into an internship. I called it an internship at BYU to just take a little bit of time off. But then I said, sorry, I just need to peace out for a while. And I had an apartment in Detroit, an apartment in Provo at one point. And I was working, going to school 2 weeks, working, managing my business a week. And that was a totally fun ride. Question? Yeah.
It was hard for you, right?
Yeah.
2 weeks on, 1 week off. How did you manage that? How have you gotten better at that? How can we do better at it early on?
Yeah. So the thing that holds true from when I left that Econ 110 class to when I finally decided to drop out for a time from school, to when I decided my business was at a point that I could re-enroll in school and have that dual living. I wasn't for a while. We were just living in Michigan for a year plus before I finally said, yeah, I think I got business to a point where I can finish my education. It's just action. It's at some point you kind of have to say, ideas flicker around and are meaningless. And it's always strange to me when an entrepreneur is like, I have this idea, but I need you to sign this document. I'm like, look, there is no value in your idea. I'm sorry. Ideas are worthless. Ideas with a little bit of action are worth a little more, and with a lot of action could be worth a lot more, but an idea alone is nothing. So at some point, you have to feel it enough, and that kind of tells you the problem you're trying to solve. It's one thing to create a cool app to more quickly deliver pizza to your dorm. It's another thing to create an app that may save lives or take serious pain out of something that you felt and that is personal to you. One has more chance, I think, of compelling you to action when there's some value that really pushes you over the edge. So let's jump back in. Hang on for just a minute. Let's jump back into this. So conventional wisdom at the time for me was that if you work really hard and if you've had some success, and you're now on this that puts you on a springboard to greater success. That we live our life in crescendo. It's eternal progression, right? That is false. There is no eternal progression or clear-cut progression in startups, okay? So again, this is like life, this is talking startups. Like the chances, my startup before this one failed. My one before that broke even. My one before that did well. My next startup, should I decide to do one, may fail. Like, I can sit here and preach to you as if I know what I'm talking about. The reality is I've learned some principles along the way, but they were so tailored. That's why half of what I care about here is that you kind of feel like I care about you and actually what I'm talking about, but I'm very clear that there is no clear-cut path. So for us, we get in this situation, and it was really uncomfortable. And so then it's like, what do you do? And this is another situation where you're placed in, and what happens in entrepreneurship is you hit these time and time again, and then you can sort of say, well, gosh, I thought it was this way, and I guess I'll just follow these, in this case, guys who think of themselves as like my stepfather in managing and telling me how to run my business. Or I can say, you know what? Me walking out of that Econ 110 class, me having the, what's the appropriate word? Gumption to leave school for a little bit with my wife, who was one credit away from graduating, and my in-laws were like expecting me to be a doctor and for her to graduate. Me to do those, maybe I'll take the same amount of like chutzpah in me and tell you as an investor, you know what? I've got a little cash. Here's your $750K back plus 10%. Peace. Like, we're done. So this is what we concocted. So we as a team, we're not going to deal with this anymore. Fortunately, we had some capital that we had saved. We prepare for the next board meeting. We say our goal in this board meeting is to tick them off. We want to talk about everything we know they hate and how we're going to do exactly what they hate to get them so lit up that we put them in a position where we can call them on their bluff and say, hey, you don't like it? You don't like us? Here's your money back. Right? Not the path you would think of in entrepreneurship. You think about how hard it is to raise money. You don't think about giving that money back after you've raised it, and by the way, spent half of it already. But that's what our reality was we had to decide, right? And this is a theme I think you can hold, is you consistently have to make decisions regardless of that fly in the face of conventional wisdom, textbook learning, and life in crescendo. Because sometimes life's crescendo is, less of a crescendo. All right? So we did that, and it worked out. We were in this situation. I remember sitting in some pink buildings in the Riverwoods area. If you've shopped or been over there, if you know those kind of pink buildings as you're going into Provo Canyon, and one of them finally makes the comment, if I could get my money back. And we're like, and in my mind I'm thinking, yes. And I'm like, you want your money back? We've got your money for you. 2 weeks from now, all of you get your $750,000 back plus 10%. And you can't say that we did you wrong. Maybe we're some arrogant young BYU students / Princeton students, but you got your money back. And in 4 months' time, like 10% on your money is not a bad annual return. So I met each of those investors, I think there were 9 of them, in the subsequent weeks, like in gas station parking lots, giving them big checks back. It felt kind of weird. But an experience you learn from. So juxtapose that with then my experience. You're kind of like, man, that's bad. And I'll tell you, like, I should say one more thing. Those men are, a lot of them, my close friends now and peers, people I still look up to. I chalk it as much up to maybe insecurity, immaturity of of us as a team as I do them being a little bit gregarious in the relationship. So this isn't a one-sided like investors suck type of song I'm trying to sing. We had to figure ourselves out of a way. This is a decision we made. We lived with it, and we moved, and we lived. This is a picture on the Great Wall. Fast forward a few years, but this gentleman he filled the stead of the investors I talked about. His name is Mike Leventhal. He's my mentor. He's an advisor to our fund. He's someone who I talk to more than my parents. And maybe that's not good, but really admire him. He was a VC at Mayfield Capital in the Bay Area for many years. There's a documentary, startup.com. He's kind of the big bad VC in it. Great guy. He'll be doing a professorship at Stanford where he did his undergrad, and he did B school this coming year. So Mike comes into play, and I start to realize what for us was really critical, and there are a few of these things. One is I was always safe with Mike. And so I talk about that at the beginning of this because I think half of our ability to take action and move forward is feeling safe, right? Hopefully at a minimum, and most importantly, safe in yourself, like I can do this. But the reality is I care about what others think of me. I care a little bit about what you think of me. I care a lot about what my wife thinks of me and my partners and colleagues. Environments that are safe, an investor, or any partner in any venture you're taking where you can feel totally like safe and that you can show your warts and all is critical, especially when you're running a business where you're constantly being rejected and denied, which is the case with most startups. 1 second and I'll come right to you. Second is being interruptible. So it's nice in I guess a larger organization to have your quarterly reviews and your one-on-one with your boss and regular touch points where you can just make sure you're still walking in lockstep. In a startup, it's like sprint, stop, duck, hide. It's blocking and tackling all the time, like all the time. And if you don't have somebody who can be interruptible for you, then you're in a tough spot. So Mike is that type of person. I text him, I call him, I get a response at the latest in 24 hours, if not within minutes or hours. And finally, somebody who will battle. I hate to play out the metaphor of like going to war flippantly because this next year, or 2 years ago, I took my dad, he was in womb during World War II, back to Holland, and I got a small taste of what war really is, and what it was like for him to actually leave a dock and travel for 12 days to the United States of America, not speaking any English with his siblings, and what war-torn Holland looked like then. So, don't misinterpret this as more than what it is. There are more important things than a startup. I'm the first to tell you that. My family and real life issues that occur within that family and here, and plenty of things that go on abroad. That said, I use the term battle because there is something real. In your sphere as an entrepreneur, there are real battles, internal battles, your own battles of your own mind, of convincing yourself you can do things that you didn't think you could, to convincing customers to buy into something that is not quite all that you're selling it to be, right? So having somebody who will kind of go arm in arm with you and is unafraid to battle is important. Question?
So this whole time when you were...
And I want a vulnerable question. I think the last one was close. It was a good question. I don't know if it quite,
So this
give me
whole time
something.
when you were leaving these investors,
Yeah.
that obviously would kind of seem like the safer route to go. What was your family and your wife and everyone saying? And if they were opposed to it, how did you kind of handle that and not let it discourage you or get you down?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Here's a book for you, Sheryl Sandberg, Lean In, awesome. You want to come grab it? Yeah. Okay. This is a good question. So I did not tell my wife what we were doing. She did not know that this was a bad decision. So I didn't, and that's why I like the question. She didn't know that everything we had kind of built, which we were young, we were in our mid-20s at the time, but what we had built up from our first start wasn't insignificant. To pay $750K back was a lot for us then, and it still is. So she didn't know. This was a bad decision. Now whenever I make any financial decisions that are of consequence, and even those of less consequence, we talk about it. So that's addressing that part of it. I was somewhat kind of doing it, hoping that I could just figure it out. Fortunately, it worked out. If it hadn't, it would have been very uncomfortable, and I would probably have lost a lot of trust in the process. You also asked about kids. What was the question?
Just like parents and in-laws and how...
Yeah. So I was fortunate. I don't know everybody's situation. I had a mom who I was raised with little. It was my mom who raised us. And so she wanted me to, whenever I talk to her, whenever I'm going on a business trip, she could care less about what deal I'm brokering or if I'm flying nice, business class to China or how much money I could make in a deal. She's always like, remember your covenants. That's what my mom actually cares about. Like, she could care less if I was an awesome garbage man or working at Subway or a VC or a tech entrepreneur. She could really care less, I think. Which I think she likes is that I'm pursuing a passion, but her questions to me have nothing to do with work. More about how are you being a present father or not, or husband or not, or member of the LDS church or not, right? That's kind of her question. Good question. One more right here.
So these are all good things to look for in like a co-founder or like a partner.
Yeah.
How do you know when to start looking for one? Because I know that I know it's not right, but I can feel protected with my ideas. Or also, I'm kind of, if I start looking for a co-founder, I'm like, in essence, saying to myself, yeah, I can't do it.
Yeah. Well, so what was my comment earlier about ideas, how valuable they are? And that's just my feeling, right? So that's not like gospel of startup, but I'm telling you that they're worth very little to nothing. And I think that by sharing freely, and we certainly live in a time where you can find out stuff about me through my Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, like quickly. You could come into this and like know stuff about me, quite personal. Same with ideas, and I think we live in a time where it's less about controlling an idea, it's more about your ability to execute on ideas, just because of the free flow of information. So I'm of the opinion that one, sharing your idea and being vulnerable with your idea, throwing it out there for people to pick at and laugh at, or to find the person who's like, dude, that resonates with me. I went through such and such a thing in my life that like makes this super personal. Like when somebody talks about innovating in healthcare, I like get flashes of, we had one child with some major medical issues. I get flashes of all the pain of like, not just your kid, but the chaos of dealing with insurance and like how still like years later, I'm like talking to them like, guys, I paid that. Like, do I have to, you know what I mean? Like it hits a personal chord. If you talk to me and you had a healthcare idea, you may be like, this dude like feels it. Then you're sort of like, well, how competent is he? Okay, it resonates with him, how competent. But I think sharing information openly and seeing who gravitates toward it, just like me with my buddy, I took the time to write a 3-page letter. His willingness, and when I gave that to him, I remember the next day saying, what'd you think? He's like, I was just like waiting for it. Like you want to see who will step up and step across that line with you, into whatever ship you're taking off in. So those are my thoughts there. Pause for a sec. The next question has to come from a woman. I know we have fewer women, I think, in here, but it has to come from a woman. You had one earlier. Go ahead.
This is a me vulnerable question.
Okay, awesome.
I'm obviously older.
Okay.
And so obviously at this point in my life, I haven't made it as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So what do you think the possibility of somebody who's kept their dreams and hasn't actually necessarily pursued them, what's the possibility of actually being successful?
I think your chances are no worse. I wouldn't give you more of an advantage necessarily, other than because I can't tell you definitively, only because I'm 36 this year. I don't know how much smarter or worse off or less likely to take risk I'll be at 46 or 56 or 66. What I can tell you is, just today, I'm texting before here one of our CEOs who, unbeknownst to me, he has a 21-year-old daughter going to school here. Maybe she's here. I won't say his name. But and I'm so used to talking to young entrepreneurs, it didn't even dawn on me. And then it kind of occurred as I'm talking to him, like, that's interesting because, yeah, some of the qualities you have that drew me to you and to my confidence in your business and your leadership make a lot of sense coming from a guy who's, in his case, in his 40s, who's raised children and has kind of had that startup in the home, of a family. So, and again, that's not insinuating that you necessarily have had kids. I don't care. But so great question. I would say that there is as much value in whatever you bring to the table. That's Reid Hoffman. He's of course of LinkedIn fame and is a thinker. So it's a bit, I would say, more rigorous a read than like a Tim Ferriss. But I think you'll like it. Whatever it is you are, what's clear is that the entrepreneurs who own it, now as a VC listening to over the past year 3,000 plus pitches, the entrepreneurs who own who they are in confidence, in the appropriate vulnerability, meaning cavalier vulnerability is just being an idiot and, and I think reckless, but appropriately saying, look, I am a bit older. But if I'm older and I'm starting a startup, it's like, I have less time to make it work. I have all the motivation in the world. Like, I'm going into my grave having gone for something in a bigger way than I've ever done before. Rather than like the entrepreneurs, like, I remember one, and he's telling me, I go, how long are you going to do this? And this is kind of a question like that. So he's like, 3 years. And in my mind, I'm like, done with this conversation. Like, see ya. Of course, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be tactful with him and kind of finish up the conversation. But the 21-year-old, like, they're a bit more reckless. They're like, if this doesn't work out, I can always go to business school. I can always work for PwC, And whereas with you, it's like, no, like she wants to hang her hat on this. Before retirement, she wants to do something big. So I think it's owning who you are, and I think there's no greater. I don't think you necessarily have an advantage. You certainly don't have a disadvantage. I view it on truly, an equal plane. Again, depending on how well the person kind of owns what they are and who they are. Good question. So jumping back in, so we figure out that situation. We have kind of great partners that we're in lockstep with, and we start growing the business. And let me just share with you without, it's impossible to summarize and to, it's impossible to really summarize what occurred in those years without really sitting down with you and like shedding some tears on the really freaking hard times of the business. But I can share with you a few bits. So this is Ann Duane. I adore Ann. She's like right there up by my wife and mom in terms of respect. She was an advisor and a mentor. She, after Harvard Business School, she went to work for the Paul Allen and his incubator. Paul Allen, like the Paul Allen of Microsoft fame. She went on to co-found a company called Military.com and is one of the hardest working, consistent people I've ever met. She was an advisor, and we found that we needed a certain caliber of leadership in experience and than we had. So we asked her to be our CEO. So she came on, and it was the best decision we ever made. So that was one kind of data point. Next is we saw this opportunity, and we moved the company to San Francisco. That's what that represents. Left Utah County. We were right here in Provo, and for months lived in like married housing right around here. She's a single, woman in her late 30s at the time, and I think, and not LDS. It was kind of an eye-opener to her, like, wow, this is different here, Sid. But that just magnifies like how great of a person this was, that she believed in the idea and us enough to come and take the reins and partner with us to lead this thing. There was a phenomenon going on. So we were in the business of helping high school students connect with American universities. Mostly American high school students connecting with American universities. At the time, this is 2009, China was really catching fire. And of course, we can all appreciate it now. Like, but if I look back then, like it was just that rise, that aggressive rise. And what happened over the next 5 years was that the number of students leaving China was growing by at least 20% every year. Number of students leaving China coming to the United States. So we thought, wow, this is an opportunity. From an LDS mission, I spoke some Chinese, and more importantly, we found really talented people in China, and we took the business to China, and it was awesome. It turns out that when we were starting our startup, John Huntsman was the governor here, and he started the Summit for Economic Development or something. I can't remember what he calls it. And they had these competitions where you could pitch your business and earn money, and we won one of these competitions, and that money was really precious to us early in our company. Well, when we went to China, guess who was the U.S. ambassador to China? John Huntsman. So it was like very serendipitous. And that serendipity, and I hope it, this comes across too, is that you work hard. I can talk like I was, kind of iron will in all this. The reality is there were so many points where this business could have failed, and just a little serendipity has to go your way. This was one of those. Like, it was nice being welcomed, in China by the U.S. ambassador to China, and somebody who had a soft spot for Utah. I could talk to him about when, at the time, I was a Ute beating BYU, and Huntsman Sr. would come in and give us a high five. Nobody's laughing, sorry. I graduated from BYU. I love BYU. Coach Rose, Dave Rose was my neighbor, so I love both programs. But anyway, so we're growing the business. And in 2011, we were in partnership with Chegg. Has anybody rented textbooks from Chegg or done Chegg study? Okay, cool. So you know Chegg. We were in a partnership with Chegg, and the synergies there, and we're getting ready to raise another round of funding. We were going to raise, I think, $15 million more. This would have been a Series C, so you kind of have your early stage, your seed finance, friends and family, seed, and then you kind of follow the alphabet. You can raise a Series A, B, C, D, and so on. We were at a Series C. It would have been, 12 or 15 million bucks, I can't remember. When we're approached by Chegg to acquire our company, and it was, of course, you start to think like, wow, we've been at this so long, and that could be really cool. And then you start to say, how is our vision going to continue with the new company and all these questions? Well, I remember I'm in Copenhagen at a conference, and I'm in my hotel, which is I can't remember the hotel, but I'm in my hotel room and I get the call. So we've been working on this deal forever from Ann. And she's like, Sid, I just wanted to call you to congratulate you. Like, we've sold the company. And it was kind of that simple. And she's like, so if you hope you have a good trip and a safe flight back and da-da-da-da. It's like kind of click. And we hang up the phone. And I just like burst into tears. I mean, it was like, and what it was some excitement, of course. This was a life-changing thing for me financially. But it was also looking back on this journey, which again, it's so hard to convey, of those times that were really scary, where the business seemed like it was going to fall apart. When personal things, like your life doesn't stop in your startup, So I lost a brother, my brother, my only bro, passed away during my startup. I had a child who almost had heart failure, and we had to rush her from China, where she was born, to the U.S., to Primary Children's, and after 12 surgeries, she's a sweet little girl. I think I have a picture of her later. There's all those things which certainly are just happen alongside your startup in life. But it was this tremendous experience. So we sell the company, and then we what's the next slide? Oh yeah, and then we march toward this. So we sell the Chegg, and part of it was there was some cash in the deal, and then we took ownership in Chegg. And the promise in 2011 was, we want to take this company public. And so we're like, all right, we're on board. We believed in it. Our CEO, Dan Rosenzweig, one of the coolest guys I know, he was the COO at Yahoo when Yahoo made the investment in Alibaba, which if any of you follow Alibaba, it's kind of a smart investment for Yahoo to have made. It represents like all of their value. Great guy. He was also the CEO of a company, if you ever played Guitar Hero. I don't know if that's like, maybe you don't know it now, you're really young, but when I was younger, we played that. And so there was this path, and we got there. So in 2013, we were approaching the IPO, which seems awesome, right? So conventional wisdom, back to that. How am I doing on time, by the way? Signal at me or holler at me, just so I have about 10 minutes. So conventional wisdom is, wow, you're off, you're acquired, you have some cash in the bank, more than you've ever had in your life, and it's all good. Right? Well, the problem is, do you see me in that picture anywhere? You don't see me in that picture. So the problem is leading up to this, there's like Sid in the corner. The problem leading up to this was I wasn't on the executive team. Ann was, right? I reported to Ann. I ran international, but I wasn't on the executive team. And Chegg had acquired 5 companies, and there wasn't enough kind of room on the stage for the founders of all the companies that they had acquired, which this sounds like, silly maybe, but it was like really hard for me. I remember being like ticked off and feeling sorry for myself and being very myopically focused on like my pride, and this was my chance, right? I sold my company, I made my money, I it had been like true to the Chegg flag, waving it proudly. Why am I not on that stage? And what you find is this, well, actually, I'll go to that in a sec. So there are points with co-founders, with success in your business, with who gets on the magazine or who gets the write-up or who gets what title, when you can definitely be selfish. And it's not always bad. You have to look out for yourself, and you put yourself out there enough, and you expect something in this journey. You do. But conventional wisdom, tells us that, well, sour grapes, and these are reasons for fractured partnerships and just being bitter at this something in life or business, right? the harder thing, and I was fortunate to get there. I don't think I would have on my own, but I called a mentor of mine, the guy who helped us in China, and he goes, Sid, why are you letting like your reality, you've been an entrepreneur your whole life. Have you ever like accepted the reality that another person has created for you? And I'm like, no. He's like, well, then why are you in this case? I'm like, well, what do you mean? I'm not there. He's like, well, what's keeping you from going to New York? What's keeping you from like walking up to the New York Stock Exchange? Yeah, you can't like dash onto the stage because you might get arrested, but why don't you go and make this an experience to remember? And so this is like one of my like most heartfelt, like memorable experiences of my life in terms of business this is my daughter, Koi. She's 10 years old now. Koi is awesome. She's got all the like fire that I love, that I see in me, and yet she has all the qualities of her mother. She like sort of got the best, I think, of both. We made this a trip together. So I said, you're right. So I booked tickets. I took Koi out. We went to see the Chegg flag flying at the New York Stock Exchange, took a picture. This is a cabbie took us straight from the airport, and we got there. It was pretty cold. I had a mustache at the time. It was November. It was Movember. I participated in Movember, and I'll wear that stash proudly. We went to Broadway as you'd expect for a young girl's first experience to New York, and this just became like an experience that I will always remember. So you talk to me now about Chegg going public, and I'm like, yeah, Chegg went public, and maybe whether their stock price is high or low, I don't care, because I think about my experience with my daughter. Like that's what I've tied to it, and the learning here, this is us going to a nice little restaurant and me with my mustache again. The reality is early on, you are your business. Like it's just that title of founder and your identity is so wrapped up in it that it's hard to detangle or decouple the two. Over time, you find that your business begins to get bigger than you, and certainly ours had far outgrown me. There were people more talented who were just as passionate leading and driving this business. And so at some point, you have to realize that the smart thing to do is to prioritize around your business, even if that seemingly is not in your personal best interest all the time. And that's hard. Like it's not a simple equation. It's a painful internal, sometimes dialogue and process, right? I don't have much more time, so I have one more book. I want somebody to ask a question, and then we'll discuss a little bit more. Lady up top.
So why did you keep going? Like you say, all these hard things happened, and your brother passed away, and
Yeah.
you were hit by hard financial times. So what made you keep going?
Yeah.
Like why was it worth it?
So sometimes maybe I could take the credit, but most of the time probably not. So like when my brother passed away, I remember, this is right in the middle of raising money. No joke, this is before that incident with those investors. I remember going into, have any of you seen MX? That billboard, of the company MX? So the CEO, Ryan Caldwell's a good friend. He was a part of Zinch early on. We're in his house, and this is like days after, I think a week after my brother passed. And I remember just going there and saying, you know what, guys, like, the last thing on my mind is running a business. I'm just going to give you my equity. I'm tapping out. Like, I just need to, like, hide in a corner all day and cry is how I felt. I mean, it was like daily. I could not go hours without just bursting into tears thinking about someone I love so much and that they're no longer here. It seems silly to, like, build a business with friends and good friends when I didn't have somebody far closer who I'd grown up with, right, shared a bed with, alongside me. So that was a moment. I remember we're sitting there and I say that, and one of my co-founders is like, look, take as much time as you need. He's like, you're still with us, you're part of this, and you're not into it right now, so what? Take your time. That was Brad Hagan. So I can't take any, if it was up to me at the time, I would have been done with that and probably just gone back to BYU, and not to diminish that, but maybe I would have just become a doctor, and that's okay too. But there were people who had a level of loyalty and care and love for me in the process. My wife, business partners that pulled me through, no question. Same thing happened with my daughter's situation in China. The guy who is our chairman in China, phenomenal guy named Tom Melcher. He's had a great career. He was like, Sid, take whatever time you need. Care for your family. Put them first. So I would say it's the people around me. I would like to say that I would make the tough decision to just kind of tough it out, but I don't know. Like, I probably would have tapped out at some points were it not for people who believe. Come grab a book. This is The Lean Startup, a good one. Maybe you've already read it, hopefully not. So maybe I'll just share one. How much time do I have? Are we done? 4 minutes. So let me go to a little bit of kind of, thank you, good question, I appreciate it. And you definitely made me feel not uncomfortable, comfortably uncomfortable. I like talking about my brother. I like feeling like emotion, for someone I love and miss. So now as a VC, a couple thoughts. We're in an interesting time where, we're sort of summiting this mountain. Entrepreneurs, and we live in a state where there are fewer oaks than elsewhere. If you were to go to the Bay Area, tech companies abound, and big, monstrous tech companies that we all know abound. In Utah, there's fewer. We know some of them. You know some of those iconic CEOs who we love to hear talk and share their war stories. But it's a tougher battle in that there are fewer. We are still growing, and I'm going to pass this because of time. I was going to give a little kind of history of venture capital in our state. I don't think it's as relevant to our discussion. But my experience is that I shared with you kind of this idea of what a VC and a partner meant to me early on in my startup. Conventional wisdom in our state, and my experience was that capital, money, viewed itself as somewhat superior to innovation. That was my experience. Fortunately for us, this has changed, where capital and innovation are hand in hand. And this is a good thing. All the VCs now, and you're at a time in your life, and should you decide to do a startup, where you have people who want to partner with you, who view the innovation that you will bring as just as important. So my message and kind of parting thoughts, and encourage any of you who want to come up and ask more questions, I look forward to getting to know you a little bit more, is that we comfortably accept the fact that there is truth that we all appreciate, right? And it means a lot to all, if not most of us. In startups, there is no truth, except for the truth you create, right? So what I can tell you is I had my truth. It was what I decided. There were these forks in the road where I say, you know what? We're going down that path. We're living with it, and we're powering through. You will create your truth. So don't accept the status quo and go create something special. Thank you so much.